Will I move the report that the doors be opened? Order. I would ask members to assist me by saying merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Canadian national funding formulas must be adjusted to consider Nunavut's unique circumstances. I have and will continue to raise my concerns with per capita funding and how it continues to fail Nunavut. Mr. Speaker, in the South, Nunavut's population would be served with one easily accessible full-service hospital. However, the reality is that our population is spread out over 25 completely isolated communities separated by thousands of kilometers. This means that the majority of Nunavut do not have the same access or service. And this is just one example of where the per capita system fails us. How is the government of Nunavut expected to provide basic services with a system of allocation like this? Nunavut deserve to have the same standard of living and basic services that Canadians in the South enjoy. This can only be achieved by changing the per capita funding system to more of a needs-based approach. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Malpeque.
Mr. Speaker, for those who brave the daily event that is question period, they may have noticed the efficiency with which the House runs. I should clarify. I don't mean the efficiency of debate, because some days we can get a bit off track. Some even going as far as to do the odd pigeon dance. The efficiency I am referring to is more logistical. They deliver messages, support the Speaker, and distribute official documents. Simply put, without them, the House would not run, and I refer to our pages. This year, a constituent from the great riding of Malpeque was chosen as one of 40 pages from across Canada. Sebastian Arsenault, a commerce student studying at the University of Ottawa, started the page program in August. I congratulate Sebastian, and I'm sure his family is very proud of him. I extend my sincere thank you to all of the wonderful pages that help the House run, and encourage graduating high school students to apply today for next year's program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Edmonton-Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday was Change the Channel Day. The Liberal Finance Minister delivered an economic update, but it was really all about changing the channel on his ethics crisis. Canadians aren't dumb. They know the minister should have put his Morneau Chappelle shares into a blind trust. He led Canadians to believe he'd done so, but he had not. Instead, he used a loophole in the Conflict of Interest Act to put them in a numbered company in Alberta. Now, after being caught, he says he'll finally do the right thing. He also tabled pension legislation that could directly benefit Morneau Chappelle. And the finance minister conveniently forgot to disclose that he owns a villa in France through a numbered company. Mr. Speaker, this scandal is so evident, even this hour has 22 minutes has teed off on it. It's time this finance minister stops trying to change the channel, apologizes to Canadians, and starts following the rules that apply to all members.
The honourable member for Newmarket Aurora.
Mr. Speaker, mental health issues, and specifically PTSD, afflict far too many Canadians. That is why I was so proud to attend the recent opening of Cadence Health and Wellness. Located in Newmarket, Cadence provides support for members of the Canadian Armed Forces, veterans, emergency first responders, and importantly, their families. Cadence is a mental health service provider providing an innovative approach to healing through one-on-one, group, and peer support programs. The team at Cadence is there every step of the way, from assisting with paperwork to hosting family fun social nights. I want to personally congratulate Chris and his wife Angels, co-founders of Cadence, as well as Greg and the entire team on their outstanding leadership and truly inspirational commitment. On behalf of everyone in Newmarket Aurora, thank you for stepping up and for helping those who need it most.
The honourable member for Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, Ojibwe Shores is an ecological national treasure. This 33 acres of land on the Great Lakes is home to rare flora, fauna, and countless species at risk. The steward of this public property is the Windsor Port Authority, who tried to bulldoze this property to the ground. But citizens have united to protect the land, named for Aboriginal heritage, and to stop unnecessary environmental degradation. In a classic shakedown, the port now wants $10 million for a 30-year lease to not develop this property. The money is to come from a community benefit fund for one of the most economically challenged areas of Ontario, Sandwich Town. This is obscene. The public should not be asked to pay for land they already own and taken from a community that needs those funds to reduce poverty, increase health, protect heritage, and a better economic future for those most disadvantaged. The Prime Minister just approved a new border crossing for a private American citizen, a billionaire. It's time to make amends. Protect Sandwich Town, protect the environment, make sure we protect those who are Canadian first.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Brampton East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, our Finance Minister tabled the fall economic update to this House and demonstrated to all members that real change is working. Mr. Speaker, the numbers speak for themselves. Canada had the fastest growing economy in the G7. Our unemployment rate is the lowest it's been since 2008, with 450,000 jobs created. Our government is enhancing the working income tax benefit by an additional $500 million per year, and it is strengthening the Canada Child Benefit by providing more after-tax dollars to Canadian families.
Yes,
and we're also reducing the small business tax rate from 11 to 9%. But Mr. Speaker, we're not done. We understand that more work needs to be done, and we will ensure that hardworking Canadians from coast to coast to coast can achieve their very own Canadian dreams.
The honourable member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, this year marks the 150th anniversary of Confederation. In 1867, our founders built a constitution and a democratic system that have endured to this day. In my riding of Wellington Halton Hills, the Halton Hills Chamber of Commerce Tourism Committee marked the occasion by challenging local residents to fly our national flag. The committee set a goal of 15,000 flags. Mr. Speaker, residents responded with unrivaled enthusiasm, and by July 1st, 57,073 flags were flying across Halton Hills. In recognition of this accomplishment, the Canadian Forces Snowbirds did a flypast over Halton Hills, dazzling the thousands of spectators below. I'd like to congratulate local residents as well as the Halton Hills Chamber of Commerce Tourism Committee for marking this occasion. As we celebrate Confederation's sesquicentennial, let us give thanks for the democratic system that we have inherited, and let us resolve to build an even stronger democracy.
The honourable member for Shefford. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to highlight the efforts of volunteers who, for 3 decades, have been at work for people living with epilepsy and their families. This year's the 30th anniversary of Epilepsy Montérégie, whose primary mission is to support people who have epilepsy by providing information on available treatments and by raising public awareness of their needs. I'd like to sincerely thank all of the dedicated volunteers, the Board of Governors, and their 2 pillars in Granby, Joanie Beauchemin and Annie Roy, who work heart and soul to help our communities deal with this illness. I also congratulate them on their courage and dedication to supporting those affected and providing care as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of this organization in my riding of Shefford. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Mr. Speaker, it is an honour to have amongst us on Parliament Hill today some of our brave young women and men who currently attend our Royal Military College in their journey to serve our great nation. This visit is one that the students undertake every year, and I'm proud to be able to stand in the House today and speak to the accomplishments of RMC and its graduates.
My riding, Kingston and the Islands, has a strong military tradition, and our community is very proud to host one of the only 2 Royal Military Colleges in Canada. Royal Military College trains officer cadets by providing them a university and military education, which creates the future leaders of our forces.
I believe all Canadians can learn and grow from the lessons that are instilled within RMC students. Allowing honesty, honor, and integrity to guide our actions every day will make Canada a greater nation and will improve the world we live in. Thank you.
The honourable member for Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the people of Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner for the opportunity to represent them in Ottawa. It's been 1 year since they elected me to champion their concerns. I'm humbled by their trust and opportunity to serve them and to work with so many incredible people from across this great nation on both sides of the aisle. I stand by my election promise to be a tireless advocate for the hardworking families, farmers, and small businesses in my Southern Alberta riding. Sectors like agriculture and energy are the heart of our local economies, provincial and Canadian, and must remain strong, viable, and competitive. It is an honour to work on public safety and national security issues, placing the safety of Canadians first, while ensuring support for victims, first responders, and those in the front line. My desire is to continue to be an effective voice and work hard for all Canadians. Mr. Speaker, I want to again thank my constituents. It is the utmost privilege to represent them in this House.
All right.
The honourable member for Mount Royal.
Mr. Speaker, in 2018, the Spanish and Portuguese Synagogue of Montreal, located in my riding in Mount Royal, will celebrate the 250th anniversary of its formal establishment. It is the oldest congregation in Canada and is a proud testament to the long history of Montreal's Jewish community. Founded originally by English Jews from the Sephardic community, whose families originated in Spain and Portugal, today it is one of Montreal's most diverse synagogues, serving Canadian Jewish families who can trace their origins back to almost every country in the world where Jews have lived.
Whether Sephardic or Ashkenazic, English or French-speaking, all Jewish Montrealers feel at home in this magnificent congregation.
Next year, a number of celebrations and exhibits to honor the anniversary will be held, and I would like to ask all of my colleagues to join me in honoring the legacy of the synagogue and congratulating it on 250 years of serving Montreal's Jewish community.
The honourable member for Dorval-Lachine-LaSalle. Cognosci ut melius facias, Mr. Speaker, to know so as to do better. Not only is this a good watchword for our committee work, but it's also the motto of Collège Sainte-Anne, one of the oldest schools in Quebec. This academic institution was founded in 1861 by the Sisters of St. Anne, and this predates our Confederation. For over 150 years, the college has provided one of the best educations in the province, and its presence has greatly enriched the city of Lachine.
Students, when I'm in the riding, as their lovely main pavilion is located near my constituency office. However, I am pleased to inform you, Mr. Speaker, that 50 young, bright minds from the school are here today on the Hill and are looking forward to our spirited debates. Hopefully, it will encourage them to get into politics. I thank them wholeheartedly for coming here today and wish them well in their studies. Go Dragons! Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, while the Liberal government was slow to act on the Rohingya crisis, their response has been non-existent when it comes to the persecution of Christians. So-called apostasy and blasphemy laws which target Christians and other minorities are widespread in the Middle East, North Africa, and parts of Southeast Asia. Conversion even carries the death penalty in some so-called moderate nations. But beyond this ongoing structural discrimination, we are seeing ancient Christian communities in the Middle East marked out for complete destruction which is well advanced in many places. This government has consistently refused to recognize the genocide of Christians at the hands of Daesh in Iraq and Syria. They have also failed to recognize that Christian refugees, clearly among the most vulnerable, are often not safe in UN refugee camps and so can't access the UN refugee certification system.
While the government has failed to prioritize human rights in general, Christians facing discrimination, ethnic cleansing, and genocide are a group to which they rarely even pay lip service. It is high time that the government do more to stand up for human rights, including the rights of Christians.
The honourable member for Pickering-Uxbridge.
Mr. Speaker, on October 10th, I attended a poppy pinning ceremony at Pickering City Hall organized by the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 606 to officially kick off the 2018 Poppy campaign. Beginning on October 27th, I encourage all Canadians to purchase and wear a poppy with pride to honor our fallen heroes. Throughout the next few weeks, there will be several events across my community honoring the sacrifices of the brave men and women who have served our country. Wearing a poppy is a powerful reminder of the bravery and valor that Canadian soldiers have and continue to display in service to our country. In the lead up to Remembrance Day ceremonies, I want to recognize the Legions in my community, Branch 606, Branch 484 in Claremont, and Branch 170 in Uxbridge for all the work they do on Remembrance Day, and indeed every day to honor and remember the fallen and support the military families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, I've discovered an important network for Canadian women working in the energy sector. WIRE, or Women in Renewable Energy, was launched in 2013 to forge partnerships for women working across a broad spectrum of renewable energy sectors and associations. Their mission is advancing the role and recognition of Canadian women working in all renewable energy and clean technologies. WIRE's programming includes capacity building, field trips, free networking, field awards, student bursaries, speed mentoring. WIRE supports the Leadership Accord for Gender Diversity in Canada's electricity sector and other programs improving organizational diversity and inclusion in that sector. Starting in Ontario, the network now includes chapters in Quebec, Alberta, British Columbia, soon coming to Newfoundland, Labrador. I'm confident you will all wish to join me in applauding the leadership of WIRE, supporting opportunities for women to contribute to building a cleaner energy future.
The honourable member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Mr. Speaker, I'd say this government is spending like drunken sailors, but that would be unfair. At least drunken sailors spend their own money. The day after we find out these Liberals have doubled down on the deficit, we get an idea of why our nation's finances are so deep in the red. The newly appointed ambassador to France would be paid up to $120,000 more than a career diplomat would earn for the same posting. This falls in line with the Liberal government's trend of overpaying for things, such as the appointment of a failed Liberal candidate as Consul General to San Francisco, who will make nearly double the post-official salary, spending over $200,000 on the 2017 budget cover and spending $110,000 in legal fees, fighting a First Nations girl over $6,000 in dental care. For the Liberals, every problem has but one solution: spend more money. That's why more than 80% of middle-class Canadians pay more tax today under this Liberal government, and it's not going to get any better.
The honourable member for Orleans. Mr. Speaker, I rise today on October 25th to mark the 10th anniversary of the passing of the motion of the former member for Ottawa-Vanier, the late Mauril Bélanger, to designate October Islamic History Month.
The aim of the commemorative month is to recognize the important contributions of Canadian Muslims to Canadian society, the importance of Canadians learning about each other to foster greater social cohesion, and the importance of efforts to organize public activities to achieve a better understanding of Islamic history.
Today, activities and celebrations are being organized all across the country to bring together Canadians from all religions and origins, to build bridges between communities, and learn more about the achievements of our Islamic friends and neighbors.
All Canadians are encouraged to take this opportunity to learn more about Islamic contributions to our great nation. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister gave approximately $400 million to Bombardier. And the first thing the company did was to give generous bonuses to its executives. And who else benefited from this? Morneau Chappelle, of course. The Minister of Finance's business has contracts with Bombardier, and the minister was an advocate for this company. When did the Prime Minister learn that the Minister of Finance had a personal interest in Bombardier's dealings? The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, what the opposition is implying is totally false. There is no conflict of interest. We are proud to have always been here for the aerospace sector and workers in this country. We are proud for having always supported workers working for Canadian companies who make extraordinary products and are responsible for economic growth. We stand for more jobs. We are staying on course, and we will continue to do so. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Bragged to the media about participating in the Bombardier bailout discussions. Now, we were told that the bailout was for jobs, but now it turns out that the jets will be built in Alabama. We were told it was for innovation, but now we know that it will be controlled in Europe. And Canadians, they're stuck with the bill for subsidizing it, except for Morneau Chappelle, which has contracts with Bombardier. So when did the Prime Minister learn that the Finance Minister had a personal interest in the Bombardier deal?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
On this side of the House, we've always stood up for Canadian aerospace workers, and we will continue to. We know those are good jobs right across the country, and the proposed deal with Airbus that we are certainly looking at under the Investment Canada Act could potentially have good jobs for Canadians at Mirabel and across the country up beyond 2041. These are the kinds of good news for the economy that Canadians expect. This is what we're continuing to work on.
Order, order. I would ask the member for Battle River Crowfoot, the member for Edmonton Riverbend, the member for Cypress Hills Grasslands to try to restrain themselves and not to interrupt in accordance with Standing Order 18. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, let's take a look at what Canadians got for their $400 million Bombardier bailout. The C-Series technology has been given to the Europeans, and the jobs have been sent to Alabama. Now, Bombardier still has the $400 million, which of course they use to give their executives big bonuses. So why did the Liberals fork over the money? Well, the Finance Minister had motivation to make it happen. Bombardier is a client of his family company. So can the Prime Minister explain why the only Canadians to benefit from the Bombardier deal are the billionaire Baudouin family and the Finance Minister's family fortune?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can understand why the opposition has nothing more to do than sling mud today, because the economic news from this country is better than it's been in a long time. In the last election, Canadians had a choice between the Conservative government that had created worse growth than we needed and not help the middle class, or this party that planned on putting money in the pockets of the middle class and helping those working hard to join it. Well, we've been doing that for 2 years, and it's creating the best economic growth in the G7, has created 400,000 jobs, most of them full-time. We're going to continue.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This government certainly has spent a lot of effort making sure that money's put in the pockets of billionaire families like the Finance Minister and his own family fortune. Now, yesterday we saw the Prime Minister trying to defend his decision to increase taxes on Canadians suffering from diabetes. Now, in typical fashion, he blamed everybody but himself. He even tried to claim that the reason why this happened was because there aren't enough people working at the Canada Revenue Agency. So why don't the Prime Minister come clean and just explain to Canadians why he chose to cancel much-needed help for those suffering with diabetes?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government will ensure that people access the benefits to which they are entitled. This is something that we are continuing to focus on. This government is focused on supporting those who need the help, on helping the middle class and those working hard to join it. We would never do anything as mean as, I don't know, cancelling health benefits for refugees or closing 9 offices for veterans across this country. Those things would be simply mean, and this government would never do that.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Order.
Let's talk about the mean-spirited attack on farmers and local business. Let's talk about the mean-spirited attack on waitresses and retail workers having their discounts passed. And now let's talk about the mean mean-spirited attack on people suffering from type 1 diabetes, Mr. Speaker. It was his government's decision to cancel this much-needed benefit. What does he say to the hundreds of thousands of Canadians suffering from this disease? Why did he take their benefit away?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Because Canadians expect us to, we will ensure that everyone who's entitled to these benefits get these benefits, Mr. Speaker. Our focus is on supporting people suffering, supporting the middle class, those working hard to join it, making sure that Canadians that need help get that. That's why we stopped sending child benefit checks to millionaires and instead are sending them to 9 out of 10 Canadians who actually need it, which has worked to not only reduce child poverty by 40% in this country, but is delivering the economic growth that 10 years of those guys could never get.
The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-Les-Basques. If the Minister of National Defence had a company that sold something, he would be in a conflict of interest. If the Minister of Health owned a pharmaceutical company, she would be in a conflict of interest. If the Minister of Natural Resources held an oil company, for example, he would be in a conflict of interest. And directly or indirectly, the Minister of Finance still owns Morneau Shepell that specializes in pension administration. Why does the Prime Minister continue to protect him? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, these are misleading comments on the part of the opposition. There is no conflict of interest. The Minister of Finance followed all the advice of the Ethics Commissioner, including setting up a wall, an ethical screen, which was the most effective measure. The Minister of Finance respected that screen and will continue to do so. That's why we will continue to invest in Canadians and create secure retirement for everyone. The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Témiscouata-Les-Basques. Well, the Minister of Finance led people to believe in his company, in his caucus, and in the country that he had put his assets in a blind trust. He misled them. And yesterday, the NDP gave an opportunity to the government and the Prime Minister to acknowledge that not only the Minister of Finance had lacked judgment, but also to close loopholes in conflict of interest legislation. That's simply common sense. Why does the Prime Minister continue to refuse to close those loopholes? Does he want to continue benefiting from them? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I feel a little bad for the NDP. All they can do is lodge these personal attacks because all we're doing is give good news. We're helping the most vulnerable of Canadians. We're putting money in the pockets of those who need it. We're creating economic growth, which is going to help everyone. And now they're just following the pattern of the Conservatives, lodging personal attacks. That's really disappointing. I hope that they start asking us questions about the economic growth that we're creating for everyone.
Honourable Member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
The voice of the out-of-touch 1%, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, you ever try to change the channel? You ever try to change the channel, but the batteries are dying in the remote, and you're just too lazy to get up and fix it? Well, that was the Liberals yesterday, trying to change the channel, but Canadians aren't buying it. Rather than admit that they screwed up and close the Morneau Shepell ethical loopholes, Liberals actually voted against it. The Prime Minister must believe there are two sets of rules, one for him and his buddies and another set for everybody else. So while Canadians are worried about protecting their pensions, why is this Prime Minister only worried about protecting his finance minister?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past weeks, I was crisscrossing the country, talking with voters in Alberta, talking with voters in Lac-Saint-Jean about the issues they're facing. And people were talking to me, grateful for the Canada Child Benefit that helps 9 out of 10 Canadian families, grateful that the first thing we did was lower taxes for the middle class and raise them on the wealthiest 1%. Pleased that we're now lowering small business taxes to the lowest rate in the G7. These are the kinds of things that help Canadians. These are the kinds of things we're happy to be talking about.
Order. Member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
He didn't just crisscross, he double-crossed this country, Mr. Speaker. I'm about to ask the I'm about to ask the Prime Minister of Canada a clear and direct question. Would anyone like to bet me whether he's actually going to answer?
Well, yeah.
Let's find out. In less than an hour, I'm going to table a motion at the Ethics Committee inviting his Finance Minister and the Ethics Commissioner to come forward and testify, to tell us exactly how this mess all started in the first place, and work with us to close these ethical loopholes. If he really wants the cloud over his Finance Minister's head, will he allow him to show up, or will he once again shove him aside and out of the way? What's it going to be?
Yeah.
You're right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we are incredibly pleased with the work the Finance Minister has done. He has lowered taxes for the middle class and raised them on the wealthiest 1%. He has put more money in the pockets of 9 out of 10 Canadian families by delivering a Canada Child benefit that's not only lifting hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty across this country, but creating economic growth of the type that is the best in the G7. These kinds of things, whether it's increasing the GIS for seniors, whether it's making sure there's more upfront grants for students going to a university, these are the kinds of things that are making a difference.
Order. Member for Carleton.
Finance Minister forked over $400 million to Bombardier. Now we know Alabama got the jobs, Europe gets the planes, the billionaire Bombardier Baudouin family gets the money, and taxpayers get the bill. Now, Mr. Speaker, who benefited from this? We now know that the company Morneau Chappelle actually has Bombardier as a client. What else is the Finance Minister hiding in his vast network of numbered companies and trust funds?
Good. Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I was happy to talk with people in Lac-Saint-Jean about Bombardier, about the work we're doing to protect aerospace workers, about the work we're doing to protect forestry workers, about what we're delivering for agriculture, agricultural communities and families, and about what we're delivering directly to Canadians in 9 out of 10 families that need help with the Canada Child benefit. These are the kinds of things that people were talking to me about, and the Conservative Party is once again showing itself to be completely out of touch with the priorities of Canadians. I can't say I mind, but it is amusing to see they haven't learned any lessons in 2 years.
Honourable Member for Carleton.
Mr. Speaker, we're not looking for some intimate detail of the Finance Minister's personal life. We don't care what he had for breakfast or what kind of socks he wears, Mr. Speaker, but we do care about the fact that he controls $330 billion of other people's money. He hid his offshore company in France. He hid his $20 million share in his family business. What else is he hiding in his vast network of numbered companies and trust funds?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians know there's a lot of back and forth that goes on in this House, and one of the things that matters to them is that we have a commissioner that is in charge of ensuring that the behaviour of all the people in this House meets the high standards of Canadians. The Minister of Finance worked with the Ethics Commissioner, followed his advice, and is willing to go above and beyond what she recommended 2 years ago. Those are the facts of the matter. And the fact that the members opposite are trying to sling mud simply highlights the fact that we need to focus on the Ethics Commissioner and what she actually determines and decides, not the partisan attacks from opposite.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
When someone controls $330 billion of other people's money, that someone's financial business is everyone's business. The new infrastructure bank will allow this Finance Minister to give out billions of dollars in loans and loan guarantees to companies that he may well own within his numbered companies and trust funds. But this Prime Minister is not insisting that he be transparent with the taxpayers who will have to pay for those very loans and loan guarantees. So once again, will the Prime Minister require that his Finance Minister reveal to all Canadians what he holds in his numbered companies?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we have an adversarial system in this House that requires the members opposite to try and attack and ask whatever questions they have. But Canadians are reassured to know that we have an Ethics and Conflict of Interest Commissioner that oversees the actual behaviors of everyone in this House and makes determinations on how they should move forward. That doesn't take away from their responsibility to try and make partisan attacks, but it should reassure Canadians that the Finance Minister worked with the Commissioner and followed her recommendations.
The honourable member for Carleton.
So the Prime Minister wants us to accept that the Finance Minister filed a secret report to the Ethics Commissioner in which he supposedly revealed what exists inside his vast network of numbered companies and trust funds. We already know that he hid from the Ethics Commissioner his offshore company in France. He hid from Canadians his $20 million share in Morneau Chapelle. The only way for us to find out if he's hiding anything else and if he's profiting privately off of his public powers is for him to reveal what's inside those companies. Why won't he?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The fundamental question here, Mr. Speaker, is whether or not the opposition trusts the Ethics Commissioner to be professional and to do her job. I can understand the personal attacks that they feel is their best way to play politics. But the fact is, we trust the Ethics Commissioner. We follow her advice. That's exactly what the Finance Minister did. All the rest is just partisan noise from the opposition.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Order, please. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Minister of Finance rushed in an economic statement in an attempt to get Canadians to forget its ethics problems, but Canadians aren't fools. The most important minister of this government is dealing with a very serious ethics crisis, including a bill that directly benefits his family company. Basically, it makes his family and his business wealthier when he's the minister, and we know that. Imagine, Mr. Speaker, what we don't know. Does the Prime Minister understand that he has to call on the minister to disclose all his assets? The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased that the member wants to talk about yesterday's economic statement because it's good news for the Canadian economy. We made a promise 2 years ago that we would put more money in the pockets of Canadians, that we would help the middle class and those working hard to join it, that we would invest in communities, and that's exactly what we did, and that gave us the results. That is economic growth for everyone. The Conservatives wanted to cut and balance the budget at any cost. It didn't work. We are investing in Canadians, and it's working. We're going to continue to do that. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, let's talk about yesterday's speech, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, I mean, he looked pretty disappointed and sad that he wasn't receiving a Canada Child Benefit check. Poor him. But the reality, Mr. Speaker, is that the Minister of Finance forgot that the wealthiest are paying $1 billion less in taxes since they came to power. And it's middle-class families that are paying $840 more yearly. The Minister of Finance forgot to say as well that he's receiving $65,000 per month from his company. Mr. Speaker, the question is clear. Why does the Prime Minister not... The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, for 10 years, the former Conservative government gave advantages and benefits to the wealthiest, and that did not deliver economic growth that Canadians wanted. We chose to increase taxes for the wealthiest and reduce them for the middle class. That's the first thing that we did. Then we delivered the Canada Child Benefit that puts more money to 9 families out of 10 by not sending the kind of check that the former Conservative government did to millionaires. This is what we're doing to deliver results for the middle class, to create economic growth, the economic growth that we see today.
The census painted a sad picture for Indigenous communities living in Canada. Indigenous people are poor, more Indigenous children are in foster care, and Indigenous people continue to face a housing crisis. 20% live in housing in need of major repairs, compared to only 6% of the non-Indigenous population. In northern Saskatchewan, I constantly hear from constituents about their difficulty finding affordable and adequate housing. Why are the Liberals still ignoring these shortfalls?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, no relationship is more important than the one between this government and Indigenous peoples. That's why we invested over $8.4 billion over 5 years to build and create opportunities and infrastructure and services in Indigenous communities. We recognize there is an awful lot of work to do, but we have taken the first meaningful steps at improving outcomes for Indigenous peoples. We've eliminated long-term drinking water advisories. We've moved forward on opening new schools for Indigenous peoples, and we're going to continue to improve services for Indigenous peoples across this country.
The honourable member for Timmins, James Bay. Order.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister spent nearly $1 million fighting Indigenous kids in court. And now his ministers are blaming the provinces, but documents show that federal programs are so underfunded that Indigenous parents actually have to give their children away to provincial foster care in order to get help. There's something fundamentally wrong in a nation where Indigenous families have to give their children away while we have a finance minister who can't remember that he owns a villa in the south of France. So will this Prime Minister call off his lawyers, stop blaming the provinces, and end this system of child-focused apartheid in Canada? Do it now.
Right. Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we feel passionately about the need to create a nation-to-nation relationship, create opportunities to set Indigenous communities on the kind of path that they have not been on for centuries because of the oppressive policies of this place and of previous governments. We are working very, very hard to fix that relationship, to move forward in a true path of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. We will continue to do so. We will continue to invest record amounts of money and work with Indigenous communities to build a better future for everyone in this country.
The honourable member for Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for 2 years, the Finance Minister led Canadians to believe that he had put his assets, Morneau Chappelle shares, in a blind trust. And only when we found out that was not the case did he admit to it and make changes. So this just begs the question, what else is he hiding in those numbered companies and in those trust funds that we don't know about that can put him in a potential conflict? Now, he'll say, well, you know, trust me. I've got a system set up that's going to work to make sure that I'm not in a conflict of interest. But, Mr. Speaker, Canadians don't believe him. I want to know from the Prime Minister, what is the Finance Minister hiding in these other numbered companies?
The right honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in this House, we trust the Ethics Commissioner. We trust her to ensure that everyone here is following the rules. We trust her to make recommendations to each of us to do the right thing. I can assure this House the Finance Minister worked with the Commissioner and followed her advice and is happy to go above and beyond her original advice to demonstrate the trust that Canadians placed in us and will continue to do so.
Honourable member for Milton.
Mr. Speaker, I've listened to the Prime Minister throughout this entire question period, and I have to say, after hearing this answer for the 7th or 8th time, the ignorance of the Prime Minister to the Conflict of Interest Act and how it works is actually embarrassing to me. Here's the point, Mr. Speaker. The Ethics Commissioner works with the public office holder to set up a conflict, but it is that minister's office members that administer the Conflict of Interest screen. Will he stop hiding behind the skirt of the Ethics Commissioner and tell us what are in these numbered
Right honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, leaving aside that unfortunate characterization of the wardrobe of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, I say that it is important that everyone in this House can work with and have confidence in the Ethics and Conflict of Interest Commissioner. This is something that protects us. Obviously, the opposition's job is to try and attack the government, and that's fine. But we all need to know that the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is there to protect us all, and she does an excellent job of that.
The honourable member for Beauce. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The opposition's work is to ensure that the Minister of Finance is not in a conflict of interest and represents all Canadians. In the Devoir today, They speak about how the Prime Minister continues to protect the Minister of Finance in his conflict of interest. If the Prime Minister cares so much about ethics, why does he not ask his Minister of Finance to disclose all his assets and all his numbered companies so that Canadians will be able to see the kind of conflict of interest that this Minister of Finance finds himself in? The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. As I said, Mr. Speaker, I have confidence, Canadians can have confidence in the Ethics Commissioner. With respect now to the work that the Minister of Finance is doing, we are very proud that the first thing he did was increase taxes for the wealthiest and decrease them for the middle class. That's not what the Conservatives wanted to do. The Conservatives always wanted to provide advantages to the wealthiest to create economic growth, but it didn't work, and it didn't work for 10 years. We prefer to invest in the middle class and those working hard to join it. And that delivered. It delivered extraordinary results over the past 2 years. Canadians will continue to put their confidence in us.
The Finance Minister failed to place his considerable assets in a blind trust, and he now finds himself in numerous conflicts of interest as a result, all thanks to a single numbered company that sheltered his Morneau-Shapelle assets. But the minister has 7 or 8 more numbered companies that are hiding the rest of his secret assets. In the interest of openness and transparency, when will the Prime Minister demand that the Finance Minister release all of his assets so that Canadians can judge just how many more conflicts of interest the Finance Minister's in?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner works with all members in this House on all sides, including everyone on both sides who hold numbered companies. This is something that the Commissioner is there to do, to set the rules so all Canadians can have confidence in it. But I understand that the members opposite have nothing to do but attack, because they have been shown over the economic growth that we've created over the past 2 years that they were completely wrong in the last election, and the Canadians were right to pick a better government.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, members of the group of experts set up by the Minister of Heritage to advise her on her cultural policy spoke out in an article in Radio-Canada. They are asking themselves if it was just a waste of time or if they were just tokens. Why? Because the Minister of Heritage simply didn't listen to them or even consult them. After 3,000 witnesses, 252 briefs, 18 months of consultations, no one is being listened to. Not the minister's advisors, and not even the minister herself if we hear the news. So tell me, what do we do about our cultural policies, and who do we listen to? We are proud of the work that we've done in the cultural milieu, which has demonstrated that we can share our stories on a world stage with Quebecers, with Canadians, with citizens of the entire world. They want our stories. Investments have been made in order to invest in our productions, our creative work, in our cultural milieu. That's exactly what it takes to be competitive in the 21st century in the digital era. The member for Sherbrooke. The Prime Minister is turning a deaf ear. Worse yet, members of the Committee of Experts were not informed of the negotiation between the government and Netflix. It was simply never discussed with them. I would imagine the government would be afraid of being told that it was the worst idea in the world for our cultural sovereignty and tax fairness. Experts have been clear. Big web-based companies must follow the same rules as Canadian businesses. No free pass. It's simple. Why did the minister set up a committee of experts and conduct consultation if he was just going to ignore them at every turn? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. What we heard, Mr. Speaker, from the committee of experts is that producers, creators in Canada are extraordinary, and they deserve to have more platforms to share their productions throughout the entire world in the digital era. That is exactly what we wanted to do. That is why we went to find investments in order to create more jobs and have more productions here in Canada in order to be able to promote our culture throughout Canada, but throughout the entire world. We are confident, we are proud of the new national digital era. That's what our producers wanted.
Mr. Speaker, this government has a lot to be proud of, including the Canada Child Benefit. Under the Conservatives, families got the same whether they earn $25,000 a year or $2.5 million, and that isn't right. Our government has stopped giving Canada Child checks to millionaires and gives more to 9 out of 10 Canadian families. And as I hear jeers from across the aisle, I know this program is lifting 300,000 Canadian children out of poverty. Can the Prime Minister advise this House how we are enhancing this incredible program to deliver change for Canadians?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I thank the member from Central Nova for his question. Our plan has always been to invest in Canadians and to trust Canadians. That's why yesterday we announced that the tax-free Canada Child Benefit will be fully indexed 2 years ahead of schedule. That'll mean that for a single mother making $35,000 with two children, her benefit will increase by over $500 in 2019-2020. This is what we can do when we stay focused on and invest in the middle class and those working hard to join it.
Honourable Member for Richmond Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, in 2016, the Minister of Finance tabled Bill C-27, an act to amend the Pension Benefits Standards Act. And, funny coincidence, Morneau Shepell immediately saw an additional profit of $2 million. My question is very simple. I would like people who are listening to us on social media get a simple answer to an extremely simple question. When will the Prime Minister demand transparency from his Minister of Finance in order to make sure that he stops deceiving the Canadian public? On the contrary, it is the opposition that is making misleading insinuations. There is no conflict of interest. The minister followed the advice of the commissioner, namely by creating a wall, which, according to the commissioner, was the most effective measure. The minister followed the rules. He respected that screen, and nothing went against Bill C-27. The honourable member for Richmond Arthabaska. All the members here in the House in 60 days had to declare their assets, but it took the Minister of Finance 2 years. What's happening here is the Prime Minister is trying to distract away from the Minister of Finance's conflict of interest situation, but the facts are there. The bill helped the Minister of Finance's own company, Morneau Shepell. Simple question for the Prime Minister. Was the Prime Minister aware that Bill C-27 was going to benefit Morneau Shepell, the Right Honourable Prime Minister? Again, Mr. Speaker, I understand that the opposition is just doing their job. It's their job to try and attack the government. But the reality is that we have an Ethics and Conflict of Interest Commissioner that makes sure that all the members of this Parliament follow the rules and that they listen to her advice. That is exactly what the minister did. I understand that they are trying to divert the attention away from economic growth and the money that we've put back into the pockets of the middle class, but it won't work.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear that Morneau Shepell and the Finance Minister will benefit from Bill C-27. And although, as we all know, the Prime Minister is a very fine and a very gifted dramatic performer, his let's just blame the Ethics Commissioner shtick is not passing the muster test. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister needs to be clean with Canadians. When did he find out that the Minister of Finance would benefit from Bill C-27?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, I'm not trying to blame the Ethics Commissioner. I'm trying to trust the Ethics Commissioner. That's what the opposition needs to do. They need to understand that despite all the attacks and mudslinging that goes on in here, we do have a system of officers of Parliament, of commissioners, who are there to ensure that people follow the rules. That's exactly what happens here. Those rules that apply to us apply to them, and we trust the advice given by the Commissioner, and will continue to go above and beyond what she asks whenever possible.
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
We trust the Ethics Commissioner, but we don't trust the government, we don't trust the Finance Minister, we don't trust the Prime Minister to give the Ethics Commissioner accurate information. interest is ultimately his responsibility. He either knew that the finance minister was making $65,000 a month off of this and he didn't care, or he didn't know, which means can he trust the finance minister's judgment and ethics? So again, when did the Prime Minister find out that the finance minister was making money off of C-27?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, I kind of feel bad for the Conservatives right now. They put forward an economic plan 2 years ago that completely failed. They attacked us nonstop for wanting to put more money in the pockets of the middle class, for wanting to invest in our communities, for wanting to support people working hard to join the middle class, and they didn't believe that doing this would actually grow the economy. But it did, and it has. We have created economic growth by doing exactly what we said, put money in the pockets of the Canadians who need it. And we're going to continue doing that, much to the despair of the poor Conservatives.
Order, order, order. Most members in all parties. Order. Order. Most members in all parties are able to sit through question period and hear things they don't like, even things that might provoke them, and not be provoked and not react. There's a few who have difficulty doing that. Je les encourage de se restreindre.
I encourage them to limit themselves.
As we get closer to Halloween, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to tell you a scary story. Like all good tales of ghosts and zombies, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is another tale that appeared dead, but apparently isn't. Despite an overwhelming percentage of Canadians that want it gone, the Liberal government just keeps bringing it back to life. In an access to information request, only 2 out of 18,000 Canadians wrote to the Liberals in support of the TPP. That's 0.01%. Why won't this government stop reviving Frankenstein and kill the TPP for good?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, unlike the NDP, we are a pro-trade party, but unlike the Conservatives, we believe in good trade deals. That's why when we negotiated a progressive version of CETA, that was the only way that CETA was actually moving forward. We continue to work with the United States to ensure that NAFTA is modernized, and yes, we continue to look for opportunities to increase trade with the Pacific, but we look to do so in a progressive way that works for everyone. That's what Canadians expect from this government. That's what we're going to deliver.
The Honourable Member for Hamilton Mountain.
Mr. Speaker, while in opposition, the Liberals vowed to change bankruptcy laws to protect workers. But since then, this government has done nothing to help workers except apparently monitor the situation, leaving workers at companies like Sears, U.S. Steel, Stelco, Algoma Steel, Wabash Mines, and Cliff Mines reeling. Today, we wrote to the Prime Minister asking him to initiate a special parliamentary investigation of the liquidation of Sears. So I ask, will the Prime Minister initiate an investigation and commit to changing bankruptcy and insolvency laws to protect Canadian workers, retirees, and their families? Yes or no?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, of course our hearts go out to the workers affected by the decision taken by Sears. We're making every effort to connect Sears employees and pensioners with programs and services that will help them through this tough time. I understand current Sears Canada pension fund assets are held in trust and must be used solely for the benefit of pensioners. Service Canada has been meeting with representatives of Sears Canada to ensure a rapid national and coordinated response to meet the needs of impacted employees. We will continue to work to help employees affected by this decision.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, Mr. Speaker, earlier in question period, the Prime Minister claimed that they would never take away a benefit from a vulnerable Canadian, but we have a letter dated May 10th that confirms that is exactly what they have done. The Liberals changed the process, resulting in an 80% denial rate for applicants suffering from type 1 diabetes. Does the Prime Minister really think that this latest tax grab on vulnerable Canadians is helping the middle class, or is it just a desperate attempt to raise additional money to fund an out-of-control spending policy?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, we're ensuring to ensure that all Canadians who deserve benefits and qualify for benefits get them. But again, the allegations or the insinuations of the members opposite that we're spending money on the wrong places really makes us wonder, what are the investments that they have such issue with? Is it putting more money in the pockets of the middle class? Is it raising taxes on the wealthiest 1% and lowering them on the middle class? These are the kinds of things that the Conservative Party worked against in the last election and continue to be railing against now, even though it's growing.
The honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, it's incredible. They're taking money away from the most vulnerable. Every day we hear more and more cases of people who were previously approved type 1 diabetics that have been rejected for the disability tax credit.
Unbelievable.
It's even worse than we thought, though. Canadians with type 1 diabetes may lose thousands more in government assistance. That's because in order to qualify for a registered disability savings plan, you have to qualify first for the disability tax credit. Will the Prime Minister stop trying to raise revenue on the backs of the most vulnerable Canadians?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, we're focused on helping and supporting the most vulnerable Canadians. That's why we're moving forward on accessibility legislation to help Canadians across the country. That's why we're ensuring that people get the benefits to which they're entitled, which is why we're actually rehiring nurses at the CRA to help process these files after, yes, oh yes, the Conservatives fired them. The fact is, we're going to continue to stay focused on Canadians who need the support and need the help. Unfortunately, the Conservatives for 10 years chose to do things like closing veterans' offices and eliminating health benefits.
Alors.
Order. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Etchemins, Lévis. Mr. Speaker, I have a very simple from a citizen from Saint-Justine for the Prime Minister. She's worried, Mr. Speaker, because she is diabetic. And her tax credit for handicapped persons has been cut off. It's also going to deprive her of her disability savings plan. It's been years that these people have had their credit automatically on the advice of their doctor. Why is the Prime Minister protecting the Minister of Finance? And why is he not helping a diabetic woman in Saint-Justine? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to work to make sure that people who qualify for assistance get it. The emphasis of this government has always been to help the most vulnerable, those who are in need, because for 10 years under the Conservative government, people had less help than what they needed. We restored the capacity to have a government at the service of citizens, and regarding this situation, I would be very happy to make sure that the Minister of Health and the Minister of Revenue follow up on that case if you approach us about that.
Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago, Canadians had a choice. They could go with the NDP and Conservative plan for cuts to services, or they could go with our plan to support the middle class and people working hard to join it. They chose our plan that helps people put a roof over their heads and healthy food on their tables. Our plan grows the economy and provides opportunities for people to join the middle class. Can the Prime Minister tell this House what we are doing to help vulnerable Canadians?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I thank the member from Toronto Danforth for her question. We know that we have a responsibility to support those who are working hard and who need just a little help. Yesterday, we announced that we will further increase the working income tax benefit by $500 million per year. This means a total increase of 65% to this program. Pedro Barata, co-chair of the National Housing Collaborative, said extra help for the working poor is welcome news, and that this announcement is a key plank to reduce poverty. Mr. Speaker, we couldn't agree more.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization has for decades been a petri dish for corruption, financial mismanagement and political bias. Instead of honouring education, science and history, UNESCO has denied Jewish history on Temple Mount and across Jerusalem and outrageously proclaimed Hebron's tomb of the patriarch to be a Palestinian World Heritage Site. The United States is withdrawing from UNESCO, as is Israel. When will Canada, when will the Liberals take a stand?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have taken a stand. We believe that ensuring that a strong Canadian voice within UNESCO continues to stand up for Israel, continues to stand up for good projects around the world, that continues to be the voice that Canadians and indeed people around the world expect from our representatives to stand up for what is right, to fight for what is right, and we believe doing that from within organizations rather than from without is in many cases the best way to go.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals claim to have raised 300,000 children out of poverty thanks to the Canada Child Benefit, and yet a new report by Citizens for Public Justice clearly demonstrates that 1 person out of 7 still lives in poverty. 1 out of 7. Even workers are living in a precarious situation. The government still has a lot of work to do to eliminate poverty. What is the government waiting for to help First Nations, workers living in poverty, children, the unemployed, people with disabilities, families, and refugees, and help them out of precariousness? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the member for her question because it gives me the opportunity to repeat what we announced yesterday. We are going to make sure that the Canada Child Benefit will be indexed to cost of living. It will help more families in the years to come to get money that they need and reduce child poverty by 40%. Furthermore, we are giving more assistance to workers living in poverty, those who are facing serious difficulties. We are investing $750 million more in 2019 so that people who need it will get help. The Honourable Member for Nickel Belt. Mr. Speaker, reliable access to drinking water, as well as access to wastewater treatment facilities, is essential to the well-being of our communities, and this is especially true for Indigenous communities. Our government is committed to renewing its relationship with Indigenous people and providing the infrastructure required for their prosperity. Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister explain to everyone the work that the government is doing to improve access to drinking water and wastewater treatment on reserve? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the member for Nickel Belt for his question. The state of drinking water and wastewater systems for First Nations is unacceptable. That's why recently we funded 235 new projects for wastewater treatment and drinking water treatment. 116 communities in Ontario benefiting from it. This project is going to improve the quality of life of those communities throughout Ontario. We are also determined to continue to do so throughout the entire country in partnership with other First Nations. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, we found out that 60 Islamic State combatants came back to Canada after waging war against our allies. How is it possible that such criminals can have the right to come back to Canada and live freely? We don't know who they are, where they are, or what their plans are. Why is the Prime Minister not proactively informing Canadians about these criminals? What are the mechanisms in place to ensure the safety of Canadians? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I can reassure the member and all Canadians that our intelligence services, including the RCMP, are working hard to ensure the safety of Canadians every single day. We are proud of having implemented a committee of parliamentarians that will soon be able to review everything that our intelligence, or rather security services, do, and to make sure that everything is being done to protect Canadians. Everything is being done to protect our values and our rules. That is the type of initiative that this government has done that the Conservative government never wanted to do. The Honourable Member for Pierre Boucher, Les Patriotes Verchères. Mr. Speaker, we now know that the Minister of Heritage negotiated her deal with Netflix and had all the information she needed in hand. She knew very well that it was a bad deal, that it was a historic day when she announced her deal. It was a historic day because it was the first time we made a law just for one company to exempt it from taxes, and everybody else had to follow the rules, but not that one. How is it that with an agreement worth $500 million, there's nothing for Francophone creators? That's unacceptable. Can the Prime Minister tell his minister to stop abandoning Francophone producers and set aside at least $133 million for them? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, there's an agreement to invest $25 million to develop projects in Quebec, and on top of that, there's $500 million that's going to go to creators throughout all of Canada, and I know that creators and producers in Quebec are of world-class quality, and it will give them opportunities to tell the stories from people here and share them not only with Canadians but with the entire world. This is a good thing for our culture in the 21st century.
Order. I would like to draw to the attention of honourable members the presence in the gallery of the Honourable Patrick O'Donovan, Minister of State at the Department of Finance and the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform of Ireland. L'Honorable Ministre du Transport.
The Honourable Minister of Transport. On the motion? No?
The
Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord is rising on a point of order. Mr. Speaker, thank you. I think that you'll find that there's unanimous consent for me to move the following motion. Given the Me Too movement initiated by women and men who've been victims of sexual harassment, that this House call on the Senate to take into consideration the victims and to pass Bill C-337 as quickly as possible, which is legislation on training, legal training on sexual harassment for judges. Does the honourable member have the unanimous consent of the House to move this motion? Agreed? Agreed. The House has heard the motion. We're not finished yet. The House has heard the motion. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt it? Carried.
The honourable member for Oshawa is rising on a point of order.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. On September 29th, I rose in the House regarding the absence of community consultation before the Liberal government decided to close the CBSA office in my riding of Oshawa. The Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety stated that consultations did in fact take place, specifically with the Mayor of Oshawa. Since that time, the Mayor has been vocal about the fact that he was not consulted and has called on the Parliamentary Secretary to set the record straight. I'd like to give my fellow Durham MP the opportunity to correct the record and apologize to Mayor